Friends, today I am going to talk to you about how we can write a unit in the self-instructional format. I am Dr. Rajendra Vadnere, Director, School of Continuing Education, and I hope that you would be inspired into writing good instructional material for the Open University system. So, let us begin. Let us see what self-instructional material is all about, because unless you know what the self-instructional materials are, you will not be able to understand what I am talking about. As you know, in the distance education system, the learnings take place by the learner at his own pace and own time, using some material which are written in such a way that he does not need a physical teacher, a human teacher to teach him. So, there is no classroom teaching setting. He goes to the study center, he does his laboratory work, but when it comes to learning a theoretical course, he uses books which are either in the printed material format or in the audio or video format. So, self-instructional formats are those which are used in the distance education system. So, one way to describe self-instructional material is simply this, that the instructional format which best suits the requirement of the learning through the distance mode is called the SIM format or the self-instructional material format. What are the features of a SIM, self-instructional material? As I told you, our student or our learner is the one who does not have any means of learning. He may be in isolated places, he may be working person, he may be someone who may be confined in the walls of a cell. So, his learning takes place only through the self-instructional format, the books which are given in the self-instructional format or the audios or videos which are supplied by the university. So, it must have 6 basic features, because it is going to substitute a physical teacher. It must be self-explanatory, that means all the explanation which you require from a teacher must be there in the self-instructional material book. It should be self-contained, that means you do not need anything else apart from whatever book which has been given to you in order to learn the material successfully. That means, we do not want the student to go to the library and refer to other books. It must be self-directed, that means the flow of the learning, the direction, all the things, the flow of the learning must be there in the material itself, in the book itself. It must be self-motivating, because our learner may not be motivated enough to learn its content. So, the book itself must provide the motivation, why he should learn, what are the various advantages which the learning of the content is going to provide him. All these things, all the motivational factor must be there inbuilt into our self-instructional material format. It also should be self-evaluating, because there is no teacher who is going to teach and who is going to test what has been taught and what has been learned. So, the evaluation is built into the system. That means, there must be enough examples, enough exercises, so that the student would be able to evaluate and see whether he is going in the right direction or not. And it must be self-learning, that means, it must provide all the components which will enable a learner to learn at his own pace and time. So, I guess you have understood the main features of an SIM. Now, let us see how a self-instructional material differs from the usual textbook which we teach in a traditional classroom setting. In short, as an abbreviation, I am using TB to denote the textbook, and self-instructional material is abbreviated as SIM. The TB, the textbooks, are for the teachers. Basically, in the classroom teaching setting, a teacher is supposed to use a textbook which may be a reference book, which may be too difficult for a learner to understand, but may be good enough for the teacher. So, the teacher is supposed to refer to a textbook and mold it according to the need of the student in the classroom. So, textbooks are teacher oriented, whereas the SIM is learner oriented. It is basically directly given to the SIM is directly given to the learner. So, it is formatted, it is shaped, it is fashioned in such a way that the learning takes place in a proper manner. Textbooks are for classroom setting. The SIM is for the self-paced at home setting. The student may be working at his home or working at his workplace, and he may be learning at his spare hours, maybe at a park, maybe in the local trains, or maybe in his working environment. So, wherever he goes, he should be able to take his learning along with him. So, it is not in the classroom setting, it is in a private setting. Then the textbooks are for the interested reader. That means, it is supposed to, it assumes that the learner is interested, whereas in SIM we arouse the interest. Textbook assumes interest and SIM arouses interest. So, this is one of the basic difference between SIM and textbook. Textbooks are written in a scholarly language. They are not written in a colloquial language or the language which is there in the common day to day parlance. It is written in an academic manner, whereas the self instruction material is written in a very simple manner. The language is supposed to be so simple that the student should be able to follow it. Textbooks assume a wide target group setting. That means, suppose you take a book, let us say in physics or electrodynamics or something like that, or in economics, then that textbook is used world over. That means, the target group is located all the world around. So, a person from Nigeria also uses the book on economics, a person in India also uses the same textbook, a person in US also uses the same textbook. So, it is very widely, it has a very wide reach, whereas the SIMS self instruction material is tailor made to suit the requirement of a student in a specific university, in a specific geographical location. In SIM we give lot of examples. Now, this is not a very very distinguishing kind of a factor. Many of the good textbooks also give lot of examples, but self instruction material must necessarily have fair enough number of examples, so that the student should be able to study and get successful in the examination. The self instruction material, a good self instruction material must also give an estimate of time as to how much time it is going to, the student is going to take in order to successfully complete that particular course. Whereas, in textbooks no such guarantee, no such activities are given. Now, that we have understood what the self instruction material is all about, and since you are going to write some self instruction material for our Open University, I would like you to understand the anatomy of a program, what is there in a program, what are the side map of a program. So, a program consists of a number of courses. A program is a qualification which the learner ends up with. For example, Bachelor of Arts is a program, BSc is a program, BSc in Mathematics is a program, BSc Hospitality and Tourism Studies is a program. So, these are the various programs which a student enters into, takes admission to, and after completing all the courses successfully is awarded that degree. A program consists of a number of courses. Courses are similar to the papers or the subjects in the conventional or traditional universities. So, in every year normally there are 8 courses, each of 4 credits, and a course consists of a number of units. For example, suppose you have a 4 credit course, it should have 12 to 16 units in it. Normally the conversion is like that 1 credit should have 3 to 4 units. So, those many units are supposed to be there in a course. Then a unit further consists of sub units. For example, suppose you have written a unit on principles of management, then it may have some sub unit, something like the duties of a manager or the supervisory nature of a manager or something like that. Depending on the content of the unit, you will divide the units into subunits, and further if the requirement is there, you will further divide into subunit. For example, suppose you are talking about the duties of a manager, the subunit may be supervisory duties of a manager, or it may be financial duties of a manager, or administrative duties of a manager, or something like that. So, depending on the nature of the content, you are going to subdivide the units or the subunits into further subunits. So, I guess that you have understood it. Even if you have not understood it, I would like you to go to our book which we have given it to you. A small document has been given it to you. If you use that document in supplement to this lecture, you would be greatly benefited. Now, let us go further details into the unit, because you are ultimately going to write a unit. Now, what is the anatomy of a unit? What is the unit consists of? A unit has a number of sections. The first section is necessarily the introduction. It introduces the subject to the learner. Then we have objectives, which tells the learner what to expect in that unit, what he will be able to do after he completes the unit successfully. Then comes the main part of the unit, that means the content which you want to deliver, the content which you want to teach. That content is divided into, as I earlier said, into subunits or subunits depending on the nature. So, you may call the unit, the section as 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 like that, or 2.1, 2.2 depending on the convention which we might have given it to you. Accordingly, you will give the section headings and the subsections or something like that. When you are teaching something, you are not supposed to teach it in a single block. A single unit or a single section may have a number of concepts. At the end of each concept, you may ask a question which may be a simple question, which will reinforce the student that he has understood that concept properly, or he has not understood the concept properly, or it may arouse some doubts in his mind, and accordingly he will proceed. So, those in text questions, those questions which are embedded in our texts are called check your progress by us. We do not want to call them in text question, because nobody will understand. It is written for the students. So, students should know very clearly, properly what is meant by that. So, when we say check your progress, it is an encouraging kind of a heading, which says that you wish to check your progress, you are progressing, but let us see how good you are progressing. And after you have completed all the sections in the unit, then at the end you will give end questions. End questions should necessarily be of 5 marks, because it is the university's policy to have 5 marks questions in the examination, and since the student would like to prepare himself for the end examination, for the final examination, the end questions must necessarily be of 5 marks. And after that, whatever references you have used in order to prepare that unit, you should acknowledge them, because if you do not acknowledge the work by other people, then maybe you are not doing justice to those people, and also you may also give the hints or the books for the further readings. So, this is how a unit is composed of. Now, we have taken a bird's eye view of a unit. Now, let us go further. How to write a introduction? As I said, necessarily the first unit or first section is the introduction. Now, what do we expect from an introduction? An introduction should necessarily motivate the learner to study that particular unit. One way to motivate a learner is to go from simple to complex strategy. It is, we believe, and it is said that there is nothing in the world about which you do not know anything. You know at least something about something, anything. So, you find out what an ordinary person who has taken admission in our program, what he may be knowing about that particular concept. So, you try to tell the student that you know at least this much, and since you know this much, the unit is related to that particular topic, and since you know this much, you will be definitely able to learn much more if you have perseverance. If you go on practicing properly, you will be able to learn more and more. So, our strategies go from simple to complex. So, you find out what is the simplest thing which the unit consists of, and then accordingly you try building it up, and you tell the student that you do not have to be afraid, it is not very difficult, you will be able to understand this topic if you go step by step, one step at a time. Then the introduction must also necessarily have a backward forward linkage. What we mean by backward forward linkage is that a unit which you are going to teach, maybe that unit is something for which you require some prerequisite knowledge, or that unit may be connected to a unit which the student has already understood or he has already taken it up, and it should also have linkage with the future units which he is going to learn. For example, suppose you are teaching the inventory management, then probably it is expected from the student that he should know something about the management. So, inventory management, if that particular unit in the inventory management is linked to something called inventory, then you should say that this unit on inventory is already there in your textbook, and you should have, it is related to it. It is better if you have read that particular book, if you have read that particular unit, then only you will be able to understand, appreciate much more this current unit. So, why we give the backward linking is because if he has not learned that particular unit or subunit, he may not be able to follow that unit properly. So, if we advise him, because the physical teacher is not there who is going to check whether the student has really gone through it. So, we give a sort of an advisory that if you not have read that particular unit, you please read it. And why we give the forward linkage is because it may be in his advantage to learn that particular unit for a future reference. And also we would like the introduction to also have something to do with his professional career. The unit, how the unit is related to his work in the professional setting. If we can give that one, it will greatly increase the value of the introduction. Next, we want to have an overview, an organizational chart. Overview means that unit is divided into sub unit or sub units, subsection or subsections, how that sections are going to progress, how they are organized. So, this concept is called advanced organizer. Suppose you know what is going to happen in a particular meeting, you come prepared and you will be able to deliver best if you already know what is going to happen, what topics are going to be discussed in that particular meeting. Similarly, when you read a unit, if you know what is going to follow, in which order, you will be able to understand that unit in much better fashion. That is why overview and organizations are given. Next, we go to objectives. For writing objectives, one acronym is used, which is called as SMART, S-M-A-R-T. S for specific, M for measurable, A for accurate, R for reliable, and T for time testable. Whatever objectives you are writing, it must not be a vague objective, it must be a very specific, very clear objective, that this is what you are going to do, this is what you are going to achieve. It should not be very vague. If it is vague, then anything which you say is correct. That is not how we like our student to progress. Measurable, that means at the end of it you should be able to measure it, whether you have correctly undertaken that activity and you have done something, you have achieved something which we can measure, then you will be able to do a better job. It should be again accurate, reliable and time testable. I do not wish to go too much into it. but I would like to go to the operational part of writing the objectives. The way we write objectives is something like this. After completing this unit, you will be able to, and then we say something like this: define management, describe the check in progress process, elaborate the problems in laundry handling, or calculate the bill for a patron in stay in the hostels, in a hotel, something like that. So, here you might have observed that after to what follows is a verb, and this verb is not an ordinary or any verb. It is a very special kind of a verb. It is called as action verb. There are some verbs which relate to actions and some verbs do not relate to actions. So, these are the action verbs. When you say define, you will have to do some activity. When we say describe, you will have to do some activity of describing something. If I say elaborate something, then you have to do an activity of elaboration. But there are certain other verbs which are not action verb. I will give you the example of non-actionable verb. For example, understand. Understand is something which happens in your mind. Remember, if you say remember that, remember means you will not be able to, you are remembering and you are not telling somebody what you have remembered, then remembering is something which is internal to you. So, we do not want those verbs which relate to your internal process. So, understand, remember, okay, those kind of verbs we do not use because those are not action verbs. So, those are not measurable. If I say remember your mother's first name, you might have remembered, you might not have remembered, there is no way to find out. If you say remember your the first school which you went to and how what was the day like, you are blank. I do not know whether you have properly understood the question or not. I do not know whether you have really recalled the first day in your school or not. So, something which is internal to you, those things we do not use as an objective. At the end of the day, you have to go to a course, you are doing a course, you are studying a course and you are giving an output which is a tangible output. And tangible output must, as I already told you in the SMART acronym, it must be measurable. So, these verbs ensure that you have written something which is measurable. Objective is a very important concept. Therefore, I am going to further elaborate what we mean by action verbs. It is a educational setting in which we are working. Since it is even though it is a distance education, it is still education. So, we have to use some basic principles of education when we talk about the objectives. And one of the basic concept of education is that there are 3 domains of learning. One is called cognitive domain, other is called psychomotor domain and third is called affective domain. And the books which we are writing, basically they pertain to the cognitive domain. Cognitive means something to do with the mind. So, that is why let us concentrate only on the cognitive domain, and there is a taxonomy which Bloom had proposed. Very basically, very simply put it, if I put it, it is something like that. When you learn something, you learn it in phases. First phase is you memorize the concept. Suppose I ask you what is the capital of India, you will say Delhi. It is just a rote learning. There is a one-to-one correspondence between nation and capitals. If I ask you what is the capital of United States, you will say Washington DC. So, there is there is nothing much to do. It is only simply some memory work which you have to do, and that kind of learning, that phase of learning is called knowledge. Suppose I gave you a word, a sentence, and if you mugged it up just like that without understanding anything, you just report. For example, a poem is there. That poem you are supposed to mug it up, you are supposed to reproduce it just like that. You may or may not have understood that meaning, but you are supposed to reproduce it just like that. So, that again that phase is called the knowledge phase. One step further, we have comprehension, where you see the meaning of each of the word in that particular sentence, and then you relate and you try to make a meaning. That is called comprehension. You have gone one step further, and you have comprehended the meaning of the sentence. For example, if I say New Delhi is the capital of India, what it means is that New Delhi is a city. New Delhi is a city. I know that it is a city, is a capital. Capital is another concept. If I understand the concept, I will say, okay, capital is a concept of India. India is a nation, is a country. So, New Delhi is the capital of India. So, I understand, I have comprehended it. I have gone one step ahead from just literally bugging up that particular sentence, and I have comprehended it. Then there is an application, I apply it. That means, for example, some principle is there or something is there, I try to relate it with my earlier experience. I have not only comprehended, but I am relating it to the experience which my personal life tells me that this is how it is. So, when I say capital, capital means New Delhi is capital of India. That means Rashtrapati Bhavan is there, Parliament is there, Supreme Court is there, and then I went there, and when somebody said, capital must necessarily have these three seats of the judiciary, seats of executive, seats of parliament must be there in the capital, then you call it as a capital. Then I understand, okay, this is how it is. That is why New Delhi is the capital of India, because there is a Supreme Court, there is a parliament, there is a Rashtrapati Bhavan. So, that is why it is. So, I have gone one step further. I have applied my knowledge, my experiences to that specific sentence, and I have gone one step further, and I have applied my knowledge to the specific situation. So, when you apply your mind and you not only comprehend, you apply your mind, you have gone one step further and you are at the application stage. After that, it is not does not end there. Then there is an analysis and synthesis, they are dual to one another. In analysis, what we do is we break a problem into parts. In synthesis, we join the parts and make up a problem. For example, when you design something, you have been given a problem and you want to design something. You want to design something which will fit into that particular situation. Then what you are doing is you are analyzing it. You are breaking that problem into smaller part, solving each of the part, and synthesizing means you have been given some device about which each of the part, you know what each of part does. So, as a whole how it is going to work, that is, suppose you want to understand, then you have synthesized the learning in the learning process, we say that you have synthesized the concepts. Why I am telling you all these is because when you are going to write a book, your role or your goal in writing the book, in teaching the specific context, may be that you have to give some judgment as to how much knowledge part I have to put into that one, what are the comprehension part which I have to give in that particular thing, what are the various situations in which I wish to put the student into, and in order to understand that specific concept in a much better manner. So, these are the basic philosophies which if you keep it in mind, you will be able to do a much better job as a self instruction material writer. Now, we have gone to the basic concept of the writing of the book. Now, let us go to the section wise content. When you are writing, now since you have already written the introduction, you have already written the objectives, now you are writing the basic part, basic body of the content. How you are going to suppose to write that basic body of the context, the content. You will be writing some headings. Now, how the headings should be? If you do it this way, see, you can write a heading in conventional traditional manner, the way a traditional textbook writes a heading. But if you are writing a self instruction material, it will be better if you write it in a much user friendly manner. For example, suppose you want to say basics of management or definition of management. This is how a traditional textbook will say, definition of management. But if you say that way, it becomes a dry one. It doesn't, it doesn't create the interest in the student. So, the same thing you could have said it in this way. What is management? When you say what is management, it is a question. It tricks your mind. It triggers your mind into thinking, okay, this is how it should be. Maybe this whatever follows after this heading will be the definition of management. This is how it is going to tell us. It is going to describe management. So, instead of writing basics of management or definition of management, we say what is management. Another way of looking at it is whatever you want to say in the the whole subunit, you can summarize in a single sentence. If it is possible, it is best. It is going to be very good thing. It will increase the value of your self-instructional material like anything. If you could write it in a single sentence, for example, suppose I say, I do not know whether it is correct or not. I am not a management person, so do not take it on the face value. This may or may not be right correct way of looking at the management. Suppose somebody says management is the art and science of planning and execution. This is suppose the heading is, this is how you put your heading. Then it involves the student in a much better manner. It will take him, this is something, if he remembers it, maybe many of his problems would be solved. And what follows in after that heading is the elaboration of this concept that management is the art and science of planning and execution. Then it will create his interest and he will be able to go through it. He knows that management is art and science of planning and execution, and what follows is the various examples about that particular sentence, how planning is done, how execution is done, how manager does the planning, how the manager does the execution, what are the various stages in the planning and what are the various stages in the execution. So, that is going to increase the value of our unit in much further manner. As I already told you, our student is not supposed to be a very college gone student, a person who has gone to the college or may not have the very sophisticated background. He may be a very poor person, he might have missed the bus, he might have gone through various hardships. So, we do not want him to burden him with very complicated kind of a language. We want a very simple language. It should be simple, but it must also be appropriate. It must have the decorum of a course material, but it should be as simple as possible, keeping the boundary of the decorum in place. We encourage the use of dialogue style like I and you. When you are referring to yourself, you say I, and when you are referring to the learner, you can say you. This is not how conventional textbooks are supposed to be written. This is how a technical writing is done. In technical literature, we use the passive voice. We say fire broke out. That means there was some fire which broke out, or we say fire broke out due to negligence of management. Suppose this is how a sentence is, but it is a passive voice. We do not say who did it. It is done in a passive manner. In active voice, you are saying who is doing it. You are saying I did it. In a scientific literature, you say sample was taken. You say I took the sample. This is how a technical and self-instructional material differs. So, here we encourage I and you kind of a writing. You may find it little bit difficult because you are more used to the traditional way of writing things. Further, you divide the units into subunits. The principle is divide and conquer. Whenever you have problems, whenever you have enemies, you divide them. Whenever you have friends, you collect them. But since teaching is a task which is a problem, we divide them. So, we divide the units or the sections into subsections, subsections depending on the nature of the need of the things. So, you take one step at a time, then you arrange them in a logical manner. So, whatever is the prerequisite to a unit or a section or subsection, it must have the prerequisite subunits which is already taught. It should not happen that you are teaching something in teaching something you are assuming some knowledge which you are going to teach in the next unit. That will like it will be like putting the putting the horse in front of the this thing, putting the cart in front of the horse. It should not happen that way. It will be preposterous. So, it should be in a, the prerequisite should be dealt in properly earlier, and then the next concept should come. So, it should be in a proper arrangement. We should follow the principle of simple to complex. So, try to give the simplest thing first, and then keep on adding the more and more organization to it, more to more complexity to it. So, you do not make things complex and then try to go for simple. You have things which are simple and then keep on adding complexity to it. Then you try to give the illustrations and illustrations in order to understand the particular concept. Illustrations could be in a number of manner. In an illustration could be an anecdote as to if you want, suppose you have given a principle, if you give an example which may be an anecdote, which may be a situation, then the learner will be able to create his reality based on the example which you have given it to him. For example, suppose you are teaching the principle like management is execution and planning. So, here suppose you give how a good manager planned something, you take a very encouraging example of some good manager and how he planned it and how things went bad when the execution did not take place in a proper manner. So, this is how you are explaining the importance of planning as well as execution. Suppose you are in the execution phase and you are not done your homework properly, you have not done the things you have not planned things in a proper manner, how things went wrong. Suppose you gave that kind of an example, an anecdote, a real history, then the learner will be able to very clearly see the things in front of his eyes. They do not think this is how it happened, and he will be able to learn very complicated concept if you give him the proper anecdotes. Sometimes you give the diagrams, tables and photographs, then he will be able to understand things in a much better manner. For example, suppose you are given some organizational structure of a company, that there is a top management, general manager is there, then you have a number of assistant managers and things like that. Then that hierarchy becomes very clear to in the eyes of the person, and he will be able to use that training for his further development. We encourage you to give examples as well as counter examples. What I mean by example and counter example is something like that. When we say that there are three articles in English, one is a, an and the. Let us forget about the for the time being. Let us see how a and an is used. So, we say that when there is a after a, suppose a vowel is to come, then you use an, a n, n. For example, suppose art or ice cream, and you say a ice cream, suppose you say a ice cream, it is going to be wrong. You have to say an ice cream. Okay. So, this is an example of this principle being used, but there is a counter example. Suppose some words begin with a letter which is not a vowel, which is a consonant, but it has a sound of a vowel, then you use an. For example, human. Okay. This is a human nature. If you say this is a human nature, it is incorrect. You have to say an human things, something like that. So, when here what is important is the sound and not the mere letter which is there. So, you have given an example and you have given a counter example where, and you have then you summarize a greater concept that the sound is more important than the characters or letters. Once you develop your sections and subsections using this kind of a methodology, then as I told you, we do not want the learning to be monotonous or boring. So, we embed small questions after each of the concept, and we call them as check your progress or CYP in short. So, after each new concept, it is advisable to put a check your progress question it should be a small question, it should not be a very huge question, long question, because if you give a long question probably he will lose the track of learning, it will go in the process of learning. So, it should be a short question, it should be the question which will reinforce the learning. Suppose I have given written a paragraph on one concept of how a customer is treated when he checks out. Then suppose I write a CYP, like what are the precautions you must take while a guest is leaving. Then this is something which he will go through, he has already gone through the paragraph, he will just memorize it, that what it was, and then he will maybe jot down something in his notebook that this is how a guest is to be treated when he checks out. So, whatever he has learned, he has made a connection in his mind, and when he answers that question, those mental connections are reinforced, those become more strong. That is the concept, that is basically the advantage, or that is the purpose of the CYP. It reinforces your learning, and it also keeps the self instruction material from being a monotonous or boring kind of an exercise. And we give the answers to the CYP nearly towards the end of the unit, just before the end questions. Now, you suppose you have written everything, you have also written the various CYP, then at the end of it, it will be good if you could give a glossary of the important concept, but we are not making it very mandatory. It will add to the value of your this thing if you put the glossary, but at the end of it you are supposed to give sufficient number of 5 marks questions, so that he will be able to do a good job in the examination. Per unit, if you can give 10 questions of 5 marks each, it will be very nice. And there is an examination at the end of the semester or end of the year, and that examination is for 3 hours and it is for 80 marks. That means, and 5 marks question, that means 16 questions would be there. That means per unit, per question, there would be 11 minutes per question if you do simple arithmetic. So, a 5 marks question should take 11 minutes of labor. So, that is how you devise your questions. It should be justifiable for the particular this thing. It may be very, it may take more of your cognitive ability of the student, or it may take a lot of labor of writing things. So, you are the best judge. It should be, the language should be suitable for the university examination paper. It should be very specific and clear. You should not assume, when you write a unit, then sometimes you assume that since it is at the end of this unit, the context says that this unit is there. So, in that context, if I ask a question whose language is insufficient, maybe in that particular context it will do the good job, but when you ask it in the examination, suppose you do not have the right context, the student will not be able to answer that question in a correct manner. So, keep that also in mind, that this is a question which may probably be used right as such in the examination, because we are preparing the student for the end examination by the end questions. So, I have already told you it should have sufficient time. Now that we have understood all the concept, let us summarize it, and I summarize it by assuming that I am going to write a unit on a specific topic. How I am going to do it? What I am going to do first is I am going to study the syllabi, the syllabus of the books, the syllabus of the learning material which I am supposed to prepare. So, I am going to study the syllabi. I am going to go through the reference books, and the books which are available in the university, the books which the previous learner might have used it. So, that becomes a benchmark, that becomes a starting point. So, step by step, as I already told you, we have to go one step at a time. So, first study the syllabus, reference books, and the books which are used by this university, or similar books which are used by other universities. Then if it is not already, if the unit has not been already formed, and suppose we have to write a the learning material for an entire course, maybe we have to break the course material into units. If it is already done by the university, you have to skip this step. Then you have to plan your content layout. Suppose you know that these are the range of concept which are going to be there in my unit, then what are going to be the subunit, subunit, things like that. So, that layout you have to prepare. Then for each of the unit or subsection or subsection, you have to think what are the difficult areas, what are the things which normally the students makes a error into, what are the things in which the student finds it very difficult. So, those concepts need your specific attention, and how are you going to make things simpler for him? You can do it by giving lots of examples, giving the photographs and things like that. So, that you have to keep in mind what are kind of illustrations and examples which you are going to give. Then if it is required, you have to use some charts, illustrations, diagrams, photographs. So, you have to also collect them, so that once you start writing, you are not going to be disturbed by lack of basic information. Once you have collected all these things, then you start writing. You prepare a first draft. You keep it in mind that this is my first draft, because many of you may be well versed in writing SIM, but many of you may be writing the self instruction material for the first time. So, those who are writing for the first time, they may need to do 2 or 3 sitting or 2 or 3 drafts for that particular unit. So, you keep it in mind that this may be a rough draft. If you think that this is going to be my final and full and final draft, you will find it very difficult to write a first word, because every time you write the first word, you will be self judging, you will be self criticizing, you will not be happy with your first sentence. So, you keep it in mind, this is my first draft, I am going to write it. If I do not like it, I will have a second draft. So, prepare the first draft of the unit, use the exact self typography which we have provided you. So, this is the very simple thing. All you have to do is you have to just go to the specific location, place, and you start typing. Wherever the things are to be in all capitals, are there in the all capitals, you will be writing only all capitals. So, that is going to make your draft look much better or look similar to how it is going to look in the end, and that is going to give you a more self satisfaction at the end of it, and it is a simpler thing. So, start writing, start preparing your draft, insert the diagrams wherever it is required, and do things like that. So, your first draft is going to look typographically the ideal and final one. It may or may not be ideal and final in the content, but it is going to typographically look that way. Once you have written this, you are happy. Okay, I have written my first draft, I am happy about it, looks fine. Now, what do I do next? You have to review and check. So, you have to review, that means you have to read it once again in a fresh mind, as if you have not written it, somebody else has written it. Keep that in mind and check whether the language is simple, whether the language is appropriate as a university's book, whether the grammars are correct, and you can also use the self check, the spelling check. It is automatic, grammar is also many times automatic, but you may or may not accept the grammar suggestion which the software might have given to you, but you see to it that grammatically it should be a proper presentable kind of a draft. Then you see the logical flow. This is where most of the new writers make mistake. What happens is you write some line, some sentence first, and then the next sentence does not relate to the first sentence, it relates to something else. This is how normally a person who is writing for the first time, this is the kind of mistake most of the people do, that one sentence should relate to the other, second sentence should relate to the third, and so on and so forth, and so the entire set of sentences make up a paragraph. This is how it should be, but many of the people, when they write it, let us face it, let us be self critical, that this is the kind of mistake which the people do, and I wish you to keep it in mind that this mistake you are not going to make, or if you make, you correct it. Other thing is one paragraph, one concept. This is one principle. So, for each concept you have to have a one paragraph. You do not have too many concepts in single paragraph. If you write too many sentences in one paragraph, so too many concepts in a one paragraph, then you might be confused. You might make the learner confused. The learner is already confused person. You do not increase to his confusion. So, make things simple. Keep this principle of one paragraph, one concept in mind. And other thing which many of us do when we write for the first time, whatever sentences we have written, it should justify the heading. For example, suppose I am writing the definition of management and suppose I am elaborating the definition of management, then I should write whatever I have written should be related to the definition of management. It should not have something to do with some other concept, some other topic, some other part which is not the principle or the definition of management. So, this is how most of the people they do something else, some processes, something like that, something which should come at another place, they by mistake write those things in that particular topic. So, sentences justify heading. This is one principle, keep it in mind. Also, another principle is that prerequisites should be already covered. It should not have something which requires a knowledge which the learner does not have, then the learner will not be able to understand it. So, you have to order the sequence in proper manner. Most important is whatever you write, it is going to be published by the university as its publication. So, there should not be any problem regarding the piracy. That means, whatever you are going to write, the university is going to subject it to anti-piracy measures, and if it is found to have been pirated, then definitely we will not be able to publish it, and therefore, see to it that whatever you are writing, you might have referred to some books, but the sentences must be your own. The copyright is to this articulation, it is not for the concepts. So, suppose Newton's law of motion, Newton has written it, the way a person articulate it is his property. But if I articulate it, if I write it in my own words, it is allowed, it is possible, and it is not a crime. But if you write the same sentences, sentence after sentence, suppose you take it from some book just like that, then it is not allowed. Only a small part of it can be copied with inverted commas, and you have to give proper reference to that particular part, then it is covered under the copyright. But whenever you are writing something new, see to it that you have gone through the textbook, but then the language must be your own, the sentences must be your own. One way to judge it, suppose you wrote some paragraph, and suppose you copied that paragraph into the Google and then try to find the match, it must not match with any of the already covered parts. If it is there, that means it is not allowed. Other law, there is a law of regarding the hatred between communities, the communal harmonies must be maintained. You should not give an example which you may find okay, but which will disturb somebody's sentiments, somebody's religious feeling or linguistic feeling or something like that. So, keep that in mind, because these are paramount, that our books must be legally proper. Then once you have gone through everything, maybe you revise it, maybe you make some corrections, maybe the corrections may be minor, maybe the corrections may be major, maybe you will like to write a second draft altogether. When I wrote my first unit for this university, it was on a topic. I wrote it. Then I thought that it might be made simple if I take a very altogether different kind of an approach, which will do away with the mathematics. It was on center of gravity. So, first draft which I wrote was similar to the textbook approach, that we do integration and things like that, and this is how we prepare it. But then I thought that my clientele is not well versed with this kind of complexity in mathematics. So, I should, if I do away with mathematics, if I can do it, it will be good. So, I reworked upon it and I tore away my first unit as my first draft, and then I rewrote completely anew, and it was much better. So, second draft, third draft, if you write, it will improve your this thing, because when you write the first time, your planning is not proper. The way you put the things in a proper perspective is not proper. When you write the second time, you learn better. If you write it third time, it will be much better, but then the increase will be less in compared to the first one. So, every time you successively make progresses, but the steps are smaller. So, we do not advise you to write too many drafts, because it is going to take time, and then you have to submit. You have to honor the deadlines given by the university, because it is a time bound process, it is a time bound activity. We have to deliver the books to the learner who is going to learn. Learner is going to not going to stop, examination is not going to stop. So, we have to pace our activities in such a way that the activities take place in right time and we honor our deadlines. After you have submitted it, it will go to a number of editors, and the editors may have their own suggestions. So, you have to respond to the editors' interactions, their suggestions. Sometimes the suggestions may not be proper, sometimes the suggestion may not be in the right this thing, it may not be correct to accept those suggestions. So, you have to give the reason why it is not right to accept the suggestion. For example, when I wrote one book on simple machines, there was a book on simple machines, there are only 5 simple machines, lever, pulleys and like that. So, the person who edited it, the language editor, he was master in language, but he was not master in mechanics. So, he suggested that you also include this bicycle or something like that, or tractor or something like that. But then we said no, there are only 5 machines, and it is important to know that these are the 5 machines, only 5 machines are there. So, we cannot add bicycle as the one machine, because that is going to create new confusion into the mind. So, sometimes the technicalities require that you do not accept the suggestions from the language editor or some other people. So, but you have to interact with the editors, so that our quality of our material is good. That is all. I think I have taken a great deal of time of you, but I hope that this interaction, even though it was a one way interaction, was helpful to you. If you have any difficulties, any doubts, you can always contact us. You can write to us on this mail address, Director, School of Continuing Education, Yashwantrao Chauhan, Maharashtra Open University, Nashik. Our phone number is 0253 2231 480, and my mobile number is also mentioned here, 9422 92640. Our website is ycmou.ac.in, and I look forward to having good cooperation with you. I look forward to have you join into our family of YCMOU sim writers. Thank you all.